This morning I'm getting dinner started before work. I'm making a version of Zuppa Toscana, except that I'm using radishes instead of potatoes. I know that sounds kind of strange, but it's just a simple switch that I can get a little more nutrient in our dinner and not quite so much starch. Just little switches like that really help along the way. And it's not every time like we do eat potatoes. In fact, we had chicken fried steak, mashed potatoes, and gravy over the weekend, and so they definitely make the diet. But every time I can find a little switch here or there, I try to work it in. And so I've already ground the meat. It's our pork sausage that we had pigs that were born and raised and butchered right here on our property, and I make all of my sausages from scratch. Those come in handy when I need quick meals. They're already seasoned up and ready to go. So I browned the sausage, and I threw in some onions, and I had some leftover mushrooms from the pizza we made the other night, so that's in there as well, just to use it up. So when I talk about making food from scratch, it's not meant to be complicated. I make food from scratch, but I keep it pretty simple. Most nights, it's just a meat and some vegetables and a side of homemade bread, or sometimes it's just meat and vegetables. And it's quick and it's healthy and it fills us up. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Some nights it's a little fancier than others, but very seldom during the week is it anything fancy. On the weekends, I usually make larger meals, and we use those leftovers for our lunches, and usually one leftover night during the week, sometimes two, depending on what I've got going. I make food from scratch because I really care about the ingredients and what is going inside of our bodies. And I know I can have some control over that. And it's about just having some simple systems. And so today I'm going to show you some systems that work for me, that help keep our routine of healthy eating. Instead of cooking every day, all day long, which I don't do, I work full time. I just do these simple systems on the weekends or in my spare time, sometimes in the evenings. Sometimes I fit some things in early in the mornings after a workout. But they're just systems that help me keep healthy food in our body. I don't want additives. I don't want preservatives. I don't want all the junk that's in processed foods. And so I know that I can control that the more that I make everything from scratch. I use my homemade chicken broth just to add extra nutrients and flavoring. Every time we process chickens and beef and wild game, I always make broth. I do it with our turkeys as well. I just make a lot of broth because it's something easy to do, to throw in the slow cooker and can it up really quick. And I have this nutrient dense broth that I can add to so many different things. I add it to soups and stews. I add it to rice. I sometimes will cook potatoes or pasta inside the broth. All those different ways, I'm just adding extra flavor and nutrients to our dinners. A lot of the herbs I grow here on the farm too, but not all of them. whatever I can fit in and dry that I have time for, that's what I can use, but I just buy the rest of it in bulk. Tonight when I get home, I will go and pick some kale out in the garden. Luckily, it's made it through our very mild winter this year. And since it's growing, I'm going to get out there and harvest some of it and add that to the pot and add some cream. And we'll do a little bit more cooking while I go out and do chores. And then dinner will be served. And I will have some extra margin in my evening this evening, which will help me. I need to get some seedlings planted, and I'm just a little behind on getting the garden prepped. So I will have that extra little margin this evening, and that's just really going to help me. In this video, I'm going to show you some of the simple systems that are important to me and how I fit them into my routine. It's just a simple rhythm that I have created that works for me, and I think that's important. Today I'll show you how I fit in yogurt, cottage cheese, granola, and homemade bread, and how they fit into my system. They save me money and time, and they make my meals a lot easier.
The first foundation in my system is yogurt. I make it about every 2 weeks, usually right after grocery shopping. And I make it in bulk because I don't want this to become something that I have to think about every day. I want it to be a background task. I fill 5 jars with whole milk. Do I wish it was fresh raw milk? Of course. But right now, store-bought whole milk works just fine for me. And I want to say this clearly, if you don't have all the things that you think you need, you don't have to wait for perfect conditions to start. Use what's accessible. Build the habit first. Once the jars are filled, I place them on a grate in a pot of water and slowly heat the milk. I'm not rushing this. When the milk reaches 180 degrees, I remove the jars and place them on a towel on the counter. Then the milk just needs to cool. Once it cools down to 110 degrees, I can add 1 to 2 tablespoons of yogurt from my previous batch into each jar. That's it. Yogurt making yogurt. Then the lids go on and they're ready to incubate. While I'm making yogurt, I also make cottage cheese because it takes the same amount of time and the same amount of space. And if I'm already in the kitchen heating milk, it just makes sense. This is what I mean when I say systems. You stack your work. For cottage cheese, I start with 1 gallon of milk. I heat it slowly to 180 degrees. Once it hits temperature, I add 3/4 of a cup of vinegar and 2 teaspoons of salt. I stir it in and I let it sit for about 45 minutes or until it's cool enough to handle. Then I strain it through a cotton tea towel and I squeeze it thoroughly. Then it goes into the fridge. And later that night or the next morning, I add cream, just enough to get it to the creamy consistency I like. For me, that's about 2/3 of a cup. It's that simple. Clean, real food. Then I put the yogurt jars into my dehydrator for about 23 hours. I like the long ferment method. I use the dehydrator because it's no fuss. It holds the temperature steady. I don't have to babysit it, and it doesn't take up any mental space. I turn it on and I walk away. When the time is up, the jars go straight into the fridge. Once the yogurt is done, the next part of the system is granola, because yogurt on its own is great, but yogurt with granola is breakfast handled. And I make a large batch every couple of weeks. This is a quadruple batch. I'm not interested in making granola every few days. I want to do the work once and then be done. This batch lasts about 2 weeks, sometimes longer. For this batch, I use 8 cups of oats, 1 cup of maple syrup, 8 tablespoons of honey, 3/4 cup of coconut oil, 2 teaspoons of vanilla, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 cup of chopped walnuts, 1/2 cup of sliced almonds, and a quarter cup of flaxseed. I also add cinnamon. This recipe is flexible. If you need to swap out nuts or leave something out, it still works. In a large bowl, I mix all of the dry ingredients. Then I gently melt the coconut oil, honey, and maple syrup together, not boiling it, just warming it enough for it to combine. Right before combining everything, I add vanilla to the warm mixture, then pour it all over the oats and stir until everything is coated. I spread it on parchment-lined baking sheets. It bakes at 325 degrees for 20 minutes. Then I pull it out, stir it, and then back into the oven for another 15 minutes. Then I let it cool completely on the pans. That's what gives you clusters. And once it's cool, it goes straight into airtight containers. And just like that, breakfast is handled for weeks. The last piece of this system is bread. I usually bake bread on the weekends, not because it's fancy, but because weekends are where I have a little more margin. Bread shows up everywhere, and when I already have bread made, the rest of the week gets easier. I start out with 3 cups of wheat berries. Right now I like mixing 1 cup of hard red wheat, 1 cup of hard white wheat, and 1 cup of spelt or emmer. I recently bought a grain mill, so I'm experimenting and I'm really thankful for it. Freshly milled flour is a major nutrition upgrade. I'm still learning, but that's the point. This isn't perfection, this is progress. Once the grain is milled, I combine about 2 cups of warm water or milk and enough flour to make a wet dough that doesn't stick to the sides of the bowl. Then I let it rest for 15 to 30 minutes. This gives the flour time to absorb the liquid. Freshly milled flour takes longer to absorb liquid, and if you don't give it that time that it needs, you're not going to get the results that you want. After the rest, I add 1 heaping tablespoon of instant yeast, 1/4 cup of butter, 1/4 cup of honey, 1 egg, and 2 teaspoons of salt. I mix everything well, and then I add flour slowly if needed. I stop when the dough pulls away from the bowl. It should be soft and workable, not stiff. Then I knead the dough for 8 to 9 minutes. After the kneading, the dough rests in an oiled bowl for about 45 minutes. Then I shape it into loaves. This recipe makes either one large loaf or two smaller loaves. I prefer the two smaller loaves. Once it's shaped and put into the loaf pans, I let it rise again for 30 to 40 minutes. Then it's ready to bake at 375 degrees for 30 to 35 minutes. If I make two loaves, one usually goes into the freezer or I send it home with my in-laws. I almost always have one pre-sliced loaf of bread in the freezer, and this comes in handy on busy weeknights whenever I need it. While the main reason I do all these systems is for the nutrition, let me tell you something about the cost savings. While I'm finishing up this bread, I will tell you about how much these things cost, and this is where things can get very interesting. This is the part that really surprised me when I finally did do the math, because I always knew I was saving money, but I didn't realize how much. Milk where I live, I can usually get it on sale for around $3 a gallon. Every 2 weeks, I use 2 gallons of milk total between yogurt and cottage cheese. So my cost is about $6. That's it, $6. From that, I get 5 quart jars of yogurt and about 1.5 pounds of cottage cheese. If I bought the store versions of the same amount, I'd easily be paying somewhere around $28 to $40. So that means every 2 weeks, I'm saving about $22 to $34. Over a course of a year, that adds up roughly to $580 to almost $900 just from yogurt and cottage cheese. That's a ridiculous return on one simple routine. Now let's look at the granola. My granola is way higher in nutrient density and it uses a much better fat profile. Most granola uses canola oil, soybean oil, vegetable oil, or sunflower oil. These are highly processed and often oxidize easily. My granola also has more protein and longer lasting fullness and no junk ingredients. There's no preservatives, there's no natural flavors, soy lecithin, cheap oils, or stabilizers. That's a legitimate health win. Now, is it cheaper? Maybe not, but I'm not competing with $3 junk granola. I'd be competing with the healthy types that you see on the store, and those are usually $7 to $10 a bag. I do think that I'm pretty close to that amount, but I'm probably somewhere around $6 to $8. So I think I'm still winning here. Now let's talk about the bread cost savings. It's another big win, and the savings add up quick. When I run the numbers, my homemade bread comes out to around $1.30 to $1.85 per loaf, and comparable store-bought whole grain bread is usually $5 to $7. So I'm saving roughly $3 to almost $6 per loaf. And over the course of a year, that's another $125 to $230 saved. And yes, the savings are great, but the real reason I do this is health. Because by making these basics myself, I'm cutting out a lot of what sneaks into store food. Preservatives, stabilizers, gums, inflammatory oils, and artificial flavors. And when you eat these foods consistently, you feel it. Better digestion, better energy, less blood sugar crash, less snack hunger, and the fresh milled grain is a huge upgrade too, because you're keeping more nutrients intact. It's just real food. So this is what it looks like in real life. Yogurt every couple of weeks, cottage cheese at the same time, granola every couple of weeks, and bread on most weekends. That's it. Not complicated, not perfect, just a rhythm that works. And when you build systems like this, you don't feel like you're constantly cooking. You feel like you're steadily building a home. And that's the real goal: food that supports life, not food that steals it. Click on the link above if you'd like to see how I fit soap making into my working full-time routine.